Ready?
Hit it!
Hello everyone and welcome to Variety Theatre, the Spice of Life podcast with Maria Lovelady
and Michael Alan-Bailey, a podcast that aims to bring all things variety out of the wings and into the limelight.
So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Coming up on today's show, we are going to be talking about the funniest man on earth.
You, Mike?
Well, no, because obviously my humour transcends to Pluto and Neptune and all those things.
And we're going to be talking to actor Daniel Taylor about his upcoming show, Something About George.
And we're also going to find out, when nobody else would, which musician backed one of the most successful comedy films of all time. And here we are. How are you feeling?
Very good.
How are you feeling about your little technical scare that you've just had?
Oh, God. So, everybody, we have got a great interview coming up for you with Daniel Taylor, who is a fantastic actor. And we have had the privilege of speaking to him today about his latest show, Something About George, which will be playing alongside our show twice nightly at the Liverpool Theatre Festival.
He's great, isn't he? Because he's really versatile. He's done loads of stage, he's done screen. I mean, we talk about playing everyone from John Lennon to Hitler. Like, you can't get more variety, more varied than that.
But why we really wanted to get him on the show is because he's very famous for playing Tommy Cooper. And honestly, when he was speaking, it was like Tommy Cooper was in the room with us. It was absolutely brilliant. But what Mike is referring to is the fact that we recorded the podcast and I saved it and I did all the technical things, and then I couldn't find it on my laptop, and it was only showing a portion of the interview, as in the 30 seconds of it.
Basically, all we had was Maria going, "Hello, we're speaking to Daniel Taylor," doing a sound check, and then it all went. And Danny had shot off, hadn't he? He had to go up to Blackpool tonight, so he'd gone. He was really lovely, and we just had a moment where we thought, "Oh my gosh, it's gone. It's gone."
But we got it back for all you to listen to, and we think that you will really, really enjoy it. So as you'll hear, there's a little bit of music in the back of some of the episode, and it's because we literally met him at his rehearsal studio when they were rehearsing for their show, which was really lovely of him to give us that time.
And the show sounds fantastic, it looks fantastic, we think it's going to be a really, really good one. Fantastic to be a part of the Liverpool Theatre Festival, Something About George.
So what have we been up to this week, Mike?
Well, we've been back in rehearsals ourselves, haven't we? We've only just started. We're not giving ourselves loads of time, but that's what we like, isn't it? That's what we like, keep it on your toes.
Well, as we've performed our show twice nightly only about 6 weeks ago at the Little Liverpool Theatre Festival, now we're performing it at the Liverpool Theatre Festival. It's actually quite interesting that it's all still there, like in your muscle memory and in your mind. So how has it been for you rehearsing this time compared to last time, Mike?
I think it's interesting because there are certain things, logistical things, that you can put to the back of your head when you know that you've done it and you know that it works. So now, more so than the first time, you can really concentrate on refinding the character almost, and you can really look at the lines and you can look at the interaction. What's really good is that we had the show filmed the first time, didn't we? So we can look back, we can reference it, and we can say, I don't like what I did there, or maybe we could develop that a little bit more, or maybe we could play around a little bit with that. And I think that's really, really good, and that's going to be really, really useful because we've watched it loads of times because we just like watching ourselves, don't we? Why would you watch anything on Amazon Prime when you can just watch yourself? Tell me how you feel about the fact that the podcast is launched.
It's brilliant. We've had such a great response from so many people listening to our first episode. Everybody loved Adam Borzone, the chair of the Music Hall Society.
Everybody loves Adam Borzone.
And it was so great to just finally get our first episode about.
Yeah, it was.
Out and
about. Great to get our first episode out and about. Oot and about.
So yes, we would love to know more actually about what you guys think. What did you love? What would you like to hear more of? And any suggestions for future episodes.
And we just love being students. We love to learn as much as we can about what we're talking about. So if you are listening to the podcast and you've got an interesting fact that you can give us about variety theatre or anybody we talk about, we would love to hear from you. Get in touch with us on our Instagram, on our Facebook page. Have a look out for Frame This Presents and give us a shout.
So, as we established in last week's podcast, Mike and I are going to bring a piece of information, a performance, a fact about the fascinating world of variety to share with you. So, Michael, what is it that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, I would like to tell you about Dan Leno, who is the funniest man on earth.
Really?
Well, no, they're not my words, but Dan Leno was actually billed as the funniest man on earth when he went over to do a performance at Hammerstein's Olympia Music Hall on Broadway in New York. Now, this was in 1897, and he was a big star in Britain on the music hall stage, and he had such a great reputation as a comedian, so they sent him over to America and billed him as the funniest man on earth, and apparently his act just didn't go very well at all. But actually, there's conflicting reports about how his act went. Some people say that actually it didn't go too badly at all, whereas others say that the humour was a little bit outdated, it was a little bit English, and unfortunately, I don't think he ever really recovered from it.
Oh, no.
I know.
I feel like as a performer, just listening to this story is giving me, like, the fear.
Oh, yeah, no,
shivers.
absolutely. You can absolutely understand why it would have affected him for the rest of his life.
And why do you think that was? Do you think that was the across the pond humour? What was it about him that you think, why did it bomb?
Well, I think it all stems from, let's go right back to the beginning. So he was born George Wilde Galvin. That was his real name. Don't you think that's such a great name?
Yeah.
And he changed it to Dan Leno.
Yeah.
I think George Wilde Galvin is fabulous.
But I think George Wild?
Wild, yeah.
George Wilde Galvin sounds a little bit like he's going to be writing some sort of literature or poetry.
Or that he's like some Wild West outlaw.
And I don't think I think Dan Leno definitely has a more comedic ring.
Yeah, no, that's true, actually. Well, he was the son of a music hall double act themselves. They were known as the singing and acting duettists.
His parents?
His parents. And he joined them on stage when he was a child. Now, when he was 4 years old, his father died. His father was an alcoholic and he passed away. And his mother married again. So Dan Leno did his first solo performance at the age of 9. So being on the stage, being a performer was just in his blood. And initially he started out clog dancing. He and his brother had a clog dancing act, which developed into him doing his solo comedy act.
I think there are not enough clog dancing acts around these days. If anyone's listening and has some clog dancing skills, send them in to us because we'd absolutely love to see them.
It's something you don't see much on Britain's Got Talent, isn't it, these days?
And I think Britain's Got Talent's all the worse for it.
Simon going, what are you going to do today? And they're like, oh, I'm gonna clog dance, Simon.
I think David Walliams would definitely press his gold buzzer for some clog dancers, wouldn't he?
He absolutely would. But Dan Leno eventually developed his act and became a massive, massive comedy star. He was really, really prolific in pantomime. He was really renowned for his dame that he would give in pantomime, and he was really, really famous for it. And he was one of the first observational comedians. A lot of his humour came from the mundanities of life and working class life, and all of his characters were, the old women next door or the huntsman or the labourers, all of these kind of people. And
so bringing it back to David Walliams, who we've just mentioned, that's a similar kind of humour, isn't it? It's looking at those people that we all know.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Finding the humour in everyday life. So that's what his act was.
100%. It was like he was the first Peter Kay or Jason Manford or David Walliams, all of these people that we've said, all these observational comedians that we have now. Because it's real life, isn't it? And that's what makes comedy. Mm-hmm. It's funny because it's true. That's where it comes from. And
I love Mrs. Merton for that. I
yes.
think that's a great example of that.
Well, it goes back to what we spoke about with our guest Adam Borzone last week, isn't it? Of all those observational things in life, but hiding it behind a character that can get away with saying what they like about the subject, whatever it is.
Exactly. So after Dan Leno went to New York and he bombed, do we know anything about his life after that?
We do, yeah, and unfortunately it's really not a happy ending. He had become an alcoholic himself. He suffered from what we would know nowadays is a lot of mental health problems, anxiety and depression, but this was a time when it wasn't really understood. People didn't know how to treat it. People didn't understand it at all. And the alcoholism fueled that a lot. And he was also really increasingly frustrated in his career. He had these aspirations that he wanted to be a serious Shakespearean actor, but nobody took him seriously. He was really pigeonholed as a comic and as a dame and as a panto performer, a little bit tacky, a little bit cheap. And he would never be hired in the roles that he aspired to. So that, fueled with the alcoholism and all his mental health problems, he actually ended up going into an asylum in 1903. And he tried several times to be released, and eventually he was, and he died not long after of alcoholism. So it's a really, really sad story. Like so many comedians who have sad endings, and you think it's made all the more terrible by the fact that they brought so much joy, and, you know, he was so revered as this genius of the stage and genius of comedy, and that it ended so sadly for him is really tragic.
And it's quite common, isn't it? We've looked throughout history, and there's famous people in our day, such as Robin Williams would be a great example. But as we've looked throughout this process of rehearsing music hall, I think mental health was a very big issue. And unfortunately, amongst comedians, it was a very big problem.
And it's such a lonely life as well. The life of a performer, even now, is such a lonely one. We spend a lot of time by ourselves. Sometimes, if you've got a really good high-flying career, it's difficult to maintain relationships, friendships, and romances. It's really, really tough. He even pursued the actress Constance Collier. Now, anyone that's a big Alfred Hitchcock fan like I am will know that Constance Collier played the eccentric aunt, Mrs. Atwater, in Rope, which is one of my absolutely favourite Hitchcock films of all time. Brilliant, brilliant film, Rope. And Dan Leno pursued her, and he tried to convince her to join him in a Shakespeare production that he was going to fund himself. He was that desperate to prove himself as a serious actor that he was going to fund this production himself. And she turned him down, and then he came back again, and he was buying her all these expensive gifts to try and woo her into appearing in this production. And she recognised that he was having a really serious mental breakdown. And interestingly enough, he was thought of as one of Liverpool's first comedians, one of the first big comedy stars to come out of Liverpool, but he was actually born in St Pancras.
Oh, right. I didn't know that. So what was the connection with Liverpool?
He moved up to Liverpool when his mum married again. They moved up to Liverpool and they settled up here, and primarily they toured the music halls in Liverpool, but they would occasionally go back down to London to do shows there. So after my mammoth piece about Dan Leno, can you give us a nice short and sweet fact that you've picked up that you want to share with everyone?
Yes. My short and sweet fact is that waiters in music halls used to chain the bottles of the drinks that they were serving to trays so that the audiences didn't grab the bottles and throw them at the acts if the acts were bad.
Oh my gosh.
And I just love that fact because... Not that I condone doing that, everybody, but I love that fact because I think it gives...
It's something we should still have today. We should still be chaining our bottles to our trays.
I love that fact because I just think that really sums up and describes what music halls were. And I feel like when I hear that fact, I can feel myself, you know, in that pub, in that theatre. I can hear the laughter and the noise and people nattering through the songs. I can hear the piano. I can hear the dancers on the stage. I can smell the smoke, you know. I can feel the atmosphere from that fact. And I think as this is a new series and some of you might be joining us that don't really know a lot about music hall, I think that little simple fact just really sort of sums up.
Rather than the 45 minutes you've just spoke, Mike, is what you're trying to say, innit? But no, it's true. And it's one of those facts as well, isn't it? That's so much better with the benefits of hindsight, because you think, here's us now going, ha ha ha, they used to chain the bottles to the trays. But can you imagine being a performer on stage singing a song and someone's lobbing a bottle at you?
Yeah, of course, the fact that it was needed. And that they actually had a system of how to handle this situation. Like,
there'd clearly been a staff meeting, hadn't there, where they'd all got together and like, well, how can we solve this problem? I'm sick of having my tray taken and thrown.
They got the Pritt stick out.
They tried it with all different things.
Glue gun.
Will this bottle go on with blue tack?
Anything will go on with blue tack.
Anything will go on with blue tack. This is what I've been trying to tell everybody for years, and nobody believes me. Whenever we talk about how to stick, we did it when we were building our set. We were having discussions about how we can stick things on and how can we get this to stay. And my solution is always blue tack. Blue tack is so underrated and it's fantastic. I just think with blue tack, the sky is the limit. I genuinely think it could hold up the Tower Bridge. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is held up by blue tack. Well, we are so excited to introduce our guest today. He is a fantastic actor, and we really, really feel so privileged that he took time out of his very busy schedule to speak to us today. He has done a little bit of everything. He's a songwriter himself. He is a fantastic actor of the stage, of the screen. He is a big name in panto. He's a big name everywhere. We just absolutely loved getting to meet him today, and we are so excited to be able to share our interview with him with you guys now.
So let's meet Daniel Taylor.
And Daniel Taylor joins us now. Welcome to the podcast, Danny. Thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you very much.
It's so lovely to have you here. We would love to know a little bit about yourself, what you're up to, and how the variety of theatre has spiced up your life.
Ooh, well, that could go many ways. What I'm up to at the minute is I'm doing a show, a celebration, if you like, of George Harrison post-Beatles. We follow his journey from the days they break up and his solo career and all the many things that he helped to make happen, from the first ever, if you like, the first ever large-scale charity concert. Without, there wouldn't have been Live Aid and Live Earth and all these different things. He did the blueprint for that, for a big concert that he put on for a friend of his called Ravi Shankar, for the people of Bangladesh, because they were going through a big refugee crisis at the time, and he wanted to help. But at the time, Ravi had said, "Oh, can you maybe get a few of your mates to come down and do a bit of a come and do a few introductions and stuff." But instead, George went and got all his mates like Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, and he said, "Why don't we put on an all-star lineup?"
Amazing.
And that was the concert for Bangladesh, and that was the blueprint for every large-scale charity concert that followed. Obviously, there's not just that with George Harrison, the great music. It's very spiritual, I guess. It's very uplifting. The songcraft and lyrically, it's beautiful. There's stuff there that he wrote with Bob Dylan.
Because he was a spiritual guy, wasn't he? How does that affect the show?
It makes it very uplifting, and that transcends into the audience. And I think that people that have followed George Harrison from his Beatles sort of time have followed him, because I mean, anyone that I've spoken to, you say, "Who's your favourite Beatle?" They all say George. But I think there was something about him that was. He had a calmness and a very forgiving nature and this very sort of peaceful I mean, Eric Clapton ended up going with his wife. She inspired songs like Bell Bottom Blues, Wonderful Tonight, Layla, and when asked if George had written a musical rebuttal to Layla, he seemed genuinely perplexed. He said, "Well, I love Eric a lot." He said, "And I'd rather she was with him than some dope."
Oh, isn't that lovely? What a great guy.
And that's just kind of how his nature of him. And I don't know, he was just a very special human being, really, regardless of sort of the Beatles. If you put that to one side, it's just listening. There's a great interview on VH1 that he did about a month before he was diagnosed with throat cancer. And it's just listening to him. He was so eloquent, so intelligent, he just had a great outlook on life, and it's actually taught me a lot as well, to sort of actually just to let go a bit more, and it doesn't matter.
Fantastic. Now, we know that this isn't the first Beatle that you've played. We know that you played John Lennon in Lennon Through the Glass Onion.
Yes, I did. Yes, I played John.
Out of the two, how is it different to play Lennon and playing George?
Well, in John Lennon, Lennon Through a Glass Onion, I played John Lennon. Mm-hmm. In Something About George, I'm talking in the first person about George.
Right.
You see, so it's me talking about George, and I'm a songwriter as well, so obviously I don't need a lot of help to be passionate about it.
So Something About George is a look at him through an outside perspective.
Yeah. With Lennon Through a Glass Onion, that was a great sort of premise, really, in the sense was it was the idea of a drowning man and his life flashing before him, and all the people that influenced John Lennon, from his Aunt Mimi growing up in Mendips, up at Menlove, and meeting Paul McCartney, losing his mum at a very young, crucial age, the same way that Paul did. And I think that that's one thing that really connected Paul and John, was the fact that they had huge tragedy at a very crucial age in their life. They're very different, very sort of, and very, very different people. But I think it was the music and the great work ethic that they had then. I mean, the days before Google and getting on the internet, when they try and work out a chord and have to bomb it right across the city to work out a D minor suspended seventh, if there is one, probably. There will be, I'm sure. But, you know, and then run back to Lennon's house or Paul McCartney's just to carry on practicing. But that was the work ethic. And, you know, it's quite phenomenal, those two. But I think with playing John, he was obviously, he was very ahead of his time, and he's a very complex human being, very, very complex, extremely intelligent, and in fact they all were, but with a very sort of acerbic wit about him, a real sort of streak, really, in some ways not so nice in when you look at it that way, but then we kind of looking at the music that he created and the legacy and, you know, sort of the driving force behind the Beatles as well, you know.
So let's talk now a little bit about variety. Who are your favourite variety performers?
Oh, right, okay. Variety performers, I mean, we could go as far back as Lauren Hardy, we can, you know, there's so many. I think for me, in terms of variety and looking at the whole sort of spectrum of it, obviously, as you probably know, I'm a big fan of Tommy Cooper's.
Yeah.
He was probably our most iconic prop comedian. And I like Tommy because I think because there was an innocence about him, you know, and there was always that sort of, oh really, me? You know, because he never actually thought he was very funny, you know.
Yeah. It's like he's here in the studio.
What's happened? You know, and it is that element that you've got to play with Tommy Cooper, and I think that's something that's very, and being able to sort of laugh at yourself. And the fact that he could do all of those the shows, and you know, there was singing and there was all kinds in there, and it was all, as my son would say, there's no swears, you know. And it's like he doesn't like swears at the minute, and I think that's great, you know. It's like, I think it's the challenge of the entertainer to be able to, can you craft your act, if you like, to please as many people as possible. But with Tommy Cooper, he was a family entertainer, but those jokes that he used to will stand up long after I've gone. In fact, all of us, you know, it's like, I broke my arm in 3 places. You know, I went to the doctors, he said, I thought that was it. I went to the doctors, I said, doctor, I broke my arm in 3 places. He said, well, stay away from the places. He said, I've had a terrible morning. I said, I went to the horse race again. I backed a horse at 20 to 1, I came in at 4:20. You know, it's just simple stuff. But it's so simple and it's so silly.
Timeless as well.
And it's timeless, but you know, and that's the thing. I mean, we took Tommy Cooper up to Edinburgh. We did a show there. It was the Tommy Cooper show, and we had a lot of Italian and Spanish people and coming to see the show, and they went, oh, we like this Tommy, you do a great act. And I went, oh no, I'm not Tommy. I said, Tommy's a person that exists. He's gone. But I felt like I stole his act.
Stole his life.
Stole his life. No, this is someone that, you know, is very well known, not just actually in the UK, actually in different parts of Europe as well. But I loved Tommy because he was a great magician. He was a fantastic magician, and I think the thing is, people say, oh yeah, he always gets it wrong, but I think with Tommy Cooper you've got to get it wrong to be able to get it right. It's like anything. You know?
Like Les Dawson with the piano.
Exactly, yeah. There's another great one, yeah.
I saw an interview with Tommy Cooper from when he did Parkinson recently, and it was the only interview he did on Parkinson, and Parky kind of introduced this clip, and he said that he was very shy, very, very private, didn't like to do interviews, and the interview was almost structured like a routine, and Parky said, I was basically there serving as the straight man for him to do his act. So how difficult is it to play someone that was so private in their personal life?
I think with Tommy Cooper, I think like a lot of people, I've got friends that are comedians, I think it's quite a lonely life for starts, whether it was back then in the 70s or the 60s, whatever, is that it's quite a lonely life. I think there's a genuine fear that you might run out of material. There's days where you have a bad show, where it's not coming across in the way that you want it. It's just the timing's all right, whatever. I think the thing is, there's a lot of things that come into it, and I think generally speaking, for people that do go into that kind of thing, I think there's the type of people that is quite common actually in art, and not just with comedians but with all kinds of creatives, is that thing of acceptance and wanting to be sort of liked, if you like, or just accepted. And I think the thing with Tommy Cooper was that in the early days when he was doing his tricks and the tricks used to go wrong, he used to be mortified, and he'd go off stage and he'd go to his dressing room and he'd be genuinely devastated. But then he could hear the audience and he'd still be laughing. And I think there was a moment when he was working in the shipyards down near Portsmouth and Southampton, where he was asked to do the Christmas show, and there was a trick with the upturned milk, and the milk went all over the floor. And he just went off stage, and he was genuine. But these are genuine moments of, I'm not going to be able to do what it is that I love to do. And I think that's the thing, is that he realised and was quite cleverly turned it on its head. As we know with the Fez, he used to wear a pith helmet in the act. I don't know whether you know about Tommy's Fez.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with the Fez was that he used to wear a pith helmet, one of these big sort of that they used to have in the war, and he'd lost it. Anyway, he was doing a gig somewhere, and he saw this waiter going by with a fez on, and he took the fez and put it on his head, and that was it.
That was it.
And then a few years later, he was in Egypt with his wife, and he saw a fella selling fezzes on a market, and he went up to him and he went, just like that. And this was the fella, and Tommy Cooper went, how do you know that? I said, that's my catchphrase. And the fellow went, I don't know anything about a catchphrase. All as I know is that when an English British person comes up here and tries on one of these fezzes, he turns around to his friends and he says, just like that.
Wow.
Or he says, just like that. And then he went,
Amazing.
you're the first one not to say it. And he went, it's true stories, absolutely priceless. Yeah,
That is incredible.
That's when you know you've hit the big time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. So I would love to know, all the people we've talked about are real people. How do you prepare when you're playing somebody that really existed as an actor?
Well, you've got to research it. I mean, luckily today, this day and age, I've met quite a lot of people that knew John Lennon, say for instance. I've been on the touring circuit with Blood Brothers and shows like that, especially for many, many years. And a lot of these theatres, there's people that still work there where Tommy Cooper went there, or there's people that, my mum and dad used to knock around in West Derby Village, and my dad knew John Lennon. He lent his kit to the Beatles. He used to play in a trad band in the city. The Beatles played at my auntie's 21st, and they were kicked off stage. All true stories, And I guess really. I mean, there's been some great people over the years. Some of them not here anymore, that could talk about John Lennon and give you a great insight into how it was for him, how it was for them, and I think it's the same with Tommy Cooper. Is that we'd go to theatres, or I took a trip to Exeter to go and see where he lived. I went down to Portsmouth, I went to Philly where he was born, just to see what makes someone, what shapes someone to who they are, And we're only shaped by what happens, events or environments and the people around us, and what they kind of bestow on us in terms of values and what's, I suppose, moralistic right or wrong or whatever. And that's how we're shaped, because we're all babies once.
Yeah.
I was asked to play Hitler in a film just last year in a movie, and I was too tall, but I still played him. They made me short. They chopped my legs off. No, they didn't. They put them back on. No, but I had to play. I had to learn about this really very twisted. I guess, and he was a bit of a loner, but I had to like him. I had to like Hitler, relate to him, and it's always, you go back to that. It's like, well, what happened from him being a baby to this point where he was an incredible orator. Have you ever seen any of his speeches?
Brilliant. Even I think that you can't understand the language.
Yeah.
You get what he's saying, you can understand the feeling.
And he can hold it.
Yeah.
And he'd wait. And he'd have these crowds literally in the palm of his hands. He knew how to, and it's that gift that I suppose great actors have, or great politicians, great leaders, or great, all of those different people, is that they're able to do that. But, people like him, but trying to understand what has gone from there to there. And that's what you've got to do with people like Tommy Cooper or John Lennon, and find out what is. And I think the thing is as well, it's always important to remember they are human beings and they do have their vulnerabilities. And I think one of the hardest things as an actor to play is vulnerability. And it's the key, really, because you can, you could play like a king in a play or in a film or whatever, but it'd be a bit boring if he was just like this king that just. But if we never saw any cracks or we never saw any frailty or the odd vulnerability coming through, then it wouldn't be as interesting, right? We wouldn't.
Absolutely.
I think it's
so what's the vulnerability of George's?
I think that he went through a stage where he was feeling a little bit sort of a disdain towards the music industry at a certain point, and definitely needed some kind of change, or things had got a little bit stagnant, I feel. And I think what happened was, I don't know whether you know about the story with Monty Python. His friend was Eric Idle, and they were looking for funding for this film that they couldn't do due to its perceived blasphemy, and it was The Life of Brian. And he put his money into this film, and he mortgaged his house.
Oh, he believed in it that much that he remortgaged his house.
He went, this is the most expensive cinema ticket in history. And that's what he called it. And they asked him why, and he said, well, I want to see it, that's why. That was the reason. He went, well, I just want to see it, so I'm going to give them. So he mortgaged his house so he could get the money readily available. And gave the money to them. And then he became a film producer, but he was getting as well known for his music as he was for his financing of films as he was for making music. You think that it wasn't just one film, it was Handmade Films have done many classics, Mona Lisa, Long Good Friday, With Nail and I, one of my favourites. So there's just, he's a fascinating man, and to look for vulnerabilities in someone that's so, of course there's vulnerabilities there. Of course there are in us all, but I would say that maybe look to the music. Yeah. Something in the way she moves is the vulnerability there, but there's always that doubt, isn't there? There's always that a hope of hope, and if it's not there, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
If there's here comes the sun, it's all about hope again. Everything's about that, but it's optimism. It's so. I guess from that kind of situation, if you break it down, then of course there's always a fragility and things like that comes with it.
And in being an artist in general, I think.
Yeah, definitely, I think. But that's what kind of, and I think when people can see that, it kind of makes them feel, well, we can believe it more, and they become more believable characters. Because, I mean, really, as actors or even singers, I mean, they're only speeches with heightened music, if you like. Yeah. So they're stories. We're just storytellers, and there's a beginning and a middle and an end. But you're a storyteller, and I think the thing is, we put on costumes, change our voices, but we try and be real. And it's about being real.
Absolutely.
And being real on the stage and in the moment. And that's the same with all of these things. And with the songs, even with George Harrison, it's like, what was this written about? Why did he write that? And that's as important. It's the same with an acting piece, is that you're finding out, well, why did William Shakespeare write this bit? Why was he, Willie Russell or whoever it is, why are those words there? Why is that comma there? What is fueling the character to speak? And it's the same with songs and people and finding their vulnerability, the bits that make them real, that people go, oh yeah.
Can relate to them.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I can believe this character now. Yeah. Before I couldn't.
So you've just mentioned some really great names from the theatre there. Now, what is your favourite theatre, and why do you think that is?
My favourite theatre that I've ever performed in, I think, is possibly... Oh God, that's such a hard question. I think my home theatre, I've got two, probably, because I did some youth theatre over at Clwyd when I was about 16, 17, and I love it there, because I did a YTS there when I was starting out, and I was going to be a stage manager. So I'm going to say Clwyd, but I'm also going to say the Liverpool Empire, because obviously it's where my family are from, it's where that's where we all hail from. So, and the Liverpool Empire, I've done five pantos there, doing good roles, and I've done Blood Brothers there so many times, and it is just when I turn up there, even walking past the stage doors, hey San, and it's just lovely.
I think it's mine as well, actually.
Yeah,
the Empire.
Definitely.
How is it different doing Blood Brothers at the Empire compared to any other city theatre in the country?
Oh, do you know, now you've said that, I loved it. I was never got onto it, but I love the Alhambra up in Bradford. You know.
Ah, lovely.
I love the Newcastle Theatre Royal. I could go on all day. I'm a proper theatre geek. You know that.
Well, that's why we're here.
That's why we're here. Yeah. But I think, in all honesty, I love to see Blood Brothers in a slightly smaller venue than the Empire. And the only reason why I say that is because as much as I love the Empire, I love that business between Mickey and Eddie. I just sometimes at the back of which is a bit of a barn of a place, and which is amazing when you're on stage and it's full, which it always is with that show, is that business just doesn't get lost sometimes. There's something special about
It's magical, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
and
magical.
you see who's been there, you know, it's everyone and anyone, you know, has walked through those doors at the Empire, and
then Ma Reggie's afterwards.
and Ma Reggie's that's it. Maybe it's because the Ma Regisons is so close to the
I think
stage
it is
door.
the biggest
Maybe
floor
that's why
of the
it is,
Empire, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we would love to know, talent aside, if you could be any style of variety performer, what would you be? Anything to do with variety? Juggler, ventriloquist.
Hey, you.
I know. That's why we're doing the show.
Do you know what? I'm quite happy with me lot.
You don't want to do
great.
it? Oh, that's
No,
great.
I'm quite happy. I thought about actually. I was thinking during the lockdowns and stuff. I mean, I kept myself really busy, you know. But I was just kind of like, oh, what if I have to go and get like what my dad says like as a proper job? And then I kind of started looking online, and I was like, oh, I don't want it. I need to be in a theatre, even if I'm just cleaning the. No. I need him just changing the lights.
Yeah.
Just don't take me. I need to. It sounds a bit. Well, I just like being there.
I love it.
Perfect.
Love it. Should we do our quick fire round?
Yeah, multiple choice, Danny, just instinctively which answer you would pick.
Liverpool or Everton?
Liverpool.
Mickey or Eddie?
Mickey.
Playing Tommy Cooper or playing George Harrison?
Sorry, George. No, George. I don't know because I'm not playing George Harrison.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
There you go. Don Lennon.
Oh. Blood Brothers or the Chuckle Brothers?
Blood Brothers.
Sat in the audience or waiting in the wings?
Waiting in the wings. I'm a terrible audience member.
Perfect. Well, it's been amazing to meet you and to speak to you today.
And you as well.
Thank you so much, Danny. Thank you.
Thank you.
And where can we find you?
Here, and then when I go through that, I'll be the other side. Where can you find me? 12th of September, I'm going to be at the Liverpool Theatre Festival in the bombed out church. It's a church with no roof because it got bombed. So yeah, so bring your brolly, because you know what it's like with the elements. And come along, get yourself a few beverages, and I'll sing you some songs and tell you some stories about a wonderful, unique, amazing musician.
Who could ask for anything more?
See you later. Bye, Danny.
Bye.
What a lovely guy.
We could have spoken to Daniel Taylor all night. We just loved him, didn't we?
This was just the perfect example of when someone's so knowledgeable and passionate about what they love.
It's infectious, isn't it? It really is infectious.
Yeah, and the charisma just oozes out of people when they're talking about that, and we really could have listened to him talking about Tommy Cooper and George Harrison all day.
So anybody that gets the chance to go and see There's Something About George at the Liverpool Theatre Festival on Sunday the 12th of September, go and see it. You are in for such a treat. It sounds like such a fantastic show.
And as long as you're there, this week is your last opportunity to get to see our show twice nightly at the Liverpool Theatre Festival and Thorrington Theatre.
Join us again next week when we'll be spicing up your life with more fabulous facts about variety theatre. All that's left for us to say is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
See you next week. So you tell us how you feel about the fact that the podcast?
Podcatch.
You tell us how you feel about the fact that the pod's been catched.